Coming up on today's San Francisco 49ers report, a lot of Niners trade rumors to get to with the deadline coming up on Tuesday. And it's a midseason crisis for San Francisco. We're going to go over some important trends and statistics as well. First, though, today's poll question is this, and I want to hear from everybody right now in the comment section. I'm gauging how the fan base feels about this football team after 3 consecutive losses. The Niners are type C for contenders, P for pretenders. Let me know down in the chat, and let's start the show. I'm Chase Sr. This is the San Francisco 49ers report, and it's all presented by Prize Picks. Get up to a $100 deposit match at prizepicks.com/CLNS and use the code CLNS for that deal to apply. This is why Prize Picks is the only daily fantasy sports app that you should download, and this is why I love it. Daily fantasy sports made easy. It's the largest independently run DFS app in North America. You get daily specials and discounts so that you can hit on some of your picks, and you can get up to that $100 deposit match. What that means, you put in $100, they'll give you $100 back. That's $200 to game with. And now that the NBA season is here and the NFL season is in full swing, as we know, because San Francisco has had 3 consecutive listless performances, you can combine your NFL picks and your NBA picks. Speaking of those specials, this is what I'm talking about right here. 26% off Jimmy Butler scoring more than 16.5 points. You can play the more or less game. You pick 2 or 3 players. You pick more or less on their projected stat lines. That's pretty much a dub right there. So that's what I'm talking about. We'll put that link down below in the comment section as well as in the description of this video. Let's start off today's show officially with the latest Niners trade rumors. According to Diana Russini, NFL insider, formerly of ESPN, now with The Athletic, she reported that San Francisco is looking to add a few pieces like edge rusher and cornerback. And general manager John Lynch, as well as this front office, the scouting department working hard, they are working the phones. And on today's show, I want to talk about 4 players specifically here going into Tuesday's NFL trade deadline. There's a lot of buzz behind these 4 players, and they could potentially land with San Francisco. Obviously, it's a fluid situation. Things change, and it comes down to an offer and an asking price. But Jaylon Johnson, cornerback for the Chicago Bears. 49ers said to be interested in him. And according to multiple reports, San Francisco reportedly reached out, and they have shown interest. That's recently, but that's also a couple of weeks ago that the Niners have done a lot of intel into the player. And then you have some local Niners reporters who are very well respected. Mike Silver, San Francisco Chronicle, Tim Kawakami of The Athletic. They're discussing the possibility of the Niners adding a player like this. San Francisco, not the only team that's interested in the 3rd highest graded cornerback in the National Football League heading into this upcoming week's action. Buffalo Bills, Dallas Cowboys also said to be interested, and they're, of course, looking to improve their roster, bulk up that secondary in hopes that it helps their Super Bowl chances. In trading for Jaylon Johnson, Montez Sweat, Chase Young, Brian Burns, all of the players who we're talking about on today's show, these moves would be classified as an all-in move in which San Francisco is going all in, wagering a lot to try to win a Super Bowl here in Las Vegas in February. Why I'd specifically love the move for Jaylon Johnson. He's one of the top cornerbacks in the game. He's at the end of his rookie contract. He's really emerging. He's getting better. And Deommodore Lenoir would then be allowed to go to the slot, and San Francisco all of a sudden would go from having a weak-ish secondary, and we'll get to the pass rush, don't you worry, because I have a lot of thoughts on that, to having an elite 1 and 2 cornerback combo. I think that Charvarius Mooney-Ward is a very solid player. I think he's better suited as a number 2 cornerback. You trade for Jaylon Johnson, he becomes your number 1. Charvarius Ward is your number 2 cornerback, and I think that Deommodore Lenoir is a really solid player. San Francisco hitting on him in the 5th round of the draft out of Oregon a few years ago. His player development has been a great story for this organization, but if he can go to the slot, it just makes your secondary so much better, and it gets Isaiah Oliver the fraud off the damn football field. These numbers are disgusting. The last 4 games, Isaiah Oliver has allowed a completion rate of 100%. I might be able to go out there and at least have a pass breakup or force an incompletion. I mean, come on now. He's given up 8 catches on 8 targets for 71 yards and 2 touchdowns. For the season, he's been the second worst cornerback in the NFL. 35 of 40 completions to attempts when targeted, and he's allowing a completion percentage of 87.5%. Get this man off my football team and bench him after the bye week. Jaylon Johnson, on the other hand, one of the top young corners in this game. Now, he's not just a rental. If you're going to give up a second-round pick for him, you most likely want to and are going to have to sign him to a contract extension. Overall Pro Football Focus grade of 84.4, a coverage grade of 85.8, a passer rating allowed of 37.3, 2 picks, 220 coverage snaps. 2 weeks ago had 2 interceptions. One of them went back for a pick 6. And I think that Mooney Ward would just be in a position in which he's more comfortable and better. And the same could be said for Diamador Lenore. And then you let Jaylon Johnson eat. I don't know what Steve Wilkes was doing with that game plan against the Bengals. They were going man coverage, zone coverage. They couldn't get a pass rush. Richard Sherman complained about the Niners running all these twist stunts, not allowing these defensive linemen to get after it at the point of attack. And I hope that going into the bye, the Niners make some adjustments. If they trade for Jaylon Johnson, it is going to be a fantastic move for this Niners defense right now and in the future. As for the latest on a couple of edge rushers, because San Francisco could certainly get better there. And I understand, right? You signed Nick Bosa to the largest contract in the history of football for a non-quarterback. He's been bad this year. Watch the post-game show from yesterday. I went off on him. There's no excuse for why he shouldn't be producing. It's pretty telling right now that when teams are game planning against San Francisco, they're leaving him on one-on-one matchups, and he cannot win. But right now, he's struggling. Niners defensive line is struggling, and you could use some edge rush help. So the word was going into Sunday that if Washington lost to the Philadelphia Eagles, and they lost a 14-3 lead and lost that game 38-31, that the Commanders would start selling. Well, how about this quote from Ron Rivera today? He declined to talk about anything related to the deadline coming up on Tuesday, but did say, quote, "Once we get past tomorrow, we'll probably have something to talk about." That sounds like a man who's defeated. That sounds like a man who knows that his job might be in question. It sounds like a man who knows that he might be losing some talented players on his side of the ball because defense is Ron Rivera's specialty. Chase Young, Montez Sweat, 2 really, really good players. The Commanders did not exercise the 5th-year option of Chase Young. I thought that they were either going to maybe franchise tag one and then re-sign one to a long-term deal, but one of these players could get moved. Shoot, both of them could get moved. And this year, both have been very, very solid. Chase Young with 5 sacks, Montez Sweat with 6.5. They would certainly fulfill individual needs for the San Francisco 49ers defense. And you think about the defensive issues for this organization right now. They have nickel slot corner issues. They can't set the edge against the run. Nick Bosa, part of that. He failed to make a couple of tackles in the backfield, and San Francisco continues to get gashed against the run. That's because of the scheme. That's because of star players not showing up and producing, but also the defensive tackles are getting pushed around. And I warned everybody when they signed Javon Hargrave in free agency. Very solid move. He's not good against the run. That maybe, he could be a weakness along that defensive line against the run game. That is rang true. And all of these trades that we're talking about on today's show address all of those issues. Going back to Mike Silver, he also said this, that Washington's Montez Sweat, Chase Young, and the Panthers' Brian Burns among those who might take some heat off the reigning Defensive Player of the Year in Nick Bosa. Bosa looked defeated at his locker after the game. In the lead-up to the game on Sunday, he said that him missing training camp in the preseason could be a reason for why he's gotten off to a slow start, because he's overthinking things that usually he's able to iron out before the season. He said it's not an excuse, but look, point blank period, Nick Bosa's been bad this year and highly disappointing. And the 2 big ticket signings for San Francisco internally the last 2 years, Debo as well as Bosa. They've both been bad after signing those lofty contracts. You know who's not bad? Brian Burns, and he's looking for a new contract. What makes this trade difficult is that you'll probably have to sign him to a contract extension after this year, and you'd have to give him a lot of money. But this year, 5 sacks, 10 quarterback hits, a pass rush grade, according to Pro Football Focus, of 75, and he has 16 pressures, according to PFF as well. And he's been getting after the quarterback for a really long time. Highly productive player as far as his sack numbers. In 2019, as a rookie, 7.5 sacks coming out of Florida State. In 2020, 9. In 2021, really good again, not 112.5. Apologies for that error, 12.5, and then last year, 12.5. And this year, 5 sacks through 7 games. So very, very productive player is Brian Burns, and a guy who would help out Nick Bosa a lot, giving you a premier edge rusher, and then other teams would not be able to double-team him. They can't double-team Nick Bosa, and maybe that solves some of the Niners' issues with not being able to get after the quarterback, even though they did have 3 sacks of Joe Burrow on Sunday, but it didn't matter because he was sitting back there real pretty, just playing pitch and catch against this awful Niners defense. We're on the road to 100,000 subscribers right here on the San Francisco 49ers Report. And as you can see with these numbers here to my right, we are less than 1,000 people away from getting that silver plaque from YouTube. So if you want informative, entertaining, and insightful Niners analysis every single day, and when big events like the trade deadline come about, we have you covered with breaking news that's more in-depth than any other YouTube channel out there. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. What is the sign of a soft team? Well, there are a couple of things that leads to a team being soft. And San Francisco, over the last 3 games, I think they've been soft mentally. They've been soft offensively, being pushed around with their offensive line. And with their defense, I just think that they've been a unit that has lacked that gusto and that swagger that they had in the first 5 games of the season. But I want to hone in on one thing in specific that the Niners have really struggled with, and it's a sign of a soft team. It's their inability to tackle. The first 5 weeks, the Niners allowed an average of 49.4 yards after contact. That was second in the NFL. During their 3-game losing streak, it's 100.7 yards after contact per game. That is 31st among 32 teams in the NFL. That's not a recipe to win a Super Bowl and be one of the league's best teams. Those yards, almost a dead even split between the run and the pass. So whether teams are throwing against San Francisco or running it against San Francisco, the Niners are getting bullied right now. They're playing like a soft football team, and they cannot tackle. The defense, really just sloppy in this area, as they've missed a total of 32 tackles in 3 straight losses. The 13 missed tackles against the Cincinnati Bengals, by far the most that they've missed in a game this year. Nick Bosa has been a part of that problem. To my count, during our watch party, I remember talking about this, he missed 2 TFLs on running plays. The one that really irked me is something that a team leader should not do and the highest paid player on the team should not do. He's lined up at right defensive end. He tries to tackle Joe Mixon. He misses the tackle, doesn't set the edge. Joe Mixon runs in for that back-breaking touchdown to seal the game. Nick Bosa turned around, and he just waved his arms like somebody should have been there to make the play. No, you're the highest paid non-quarterback in the history of football. It's on you to make the play. And those types of actions, that body language, that play is not what team leaders do. As for Brock Purdy, 2nd game in a row in which he's played really well in the first 3 quarters, and then he fell apart in the 4th quarter. There's been some good. There's also been some bad. Let's not forget a couple of the high-level throws that Brock Purdy was able to make. Downfield, down the seam, down the numbers to George Kittle and Brandon Ayuk. Layering balls in there, touch and accuracy, arm strength and zip. So keep in mind that Brock Purdy the last 2 weeks has made some really impressive plays and throws. Those throws to Kittle, Ayuk, and a couple of others, those are high-level darts. Purdy was also 4 of 5 on throws of 20-plus yards downfield, and the only miss was that drop by Brandon Ayuk, which could have allowed the Niners to get 3 points before halftime and flip the momentum. Instead, Ayuk, who's had a couple of drops uncharacteristically the last couple of weeks, allowed that football to bounce off his face mask. The chunk plays were there, which is why the Niners had success in moving the football. But when they've gotten into the red zone, especially the last 2 weeks, same can be said against the Browns as well, those drives stall, and they're not able to capitalize with a touchdown in the red area. The first interception for Purdy was supposed to either be a handoff or a shovel pass to George Kittle. It was a busted play, and Purdy made the worst possible decision to throw that ball. He'll tell you that. You can't throw the ball in that situation, especially if it's supposed to be a shovel pass. That's a running play. The offensive linemen are downfield. So either way, whether you threw a touchdown, you threw an incompletion, or you got picked off, it was going to be an illegal man downfield anyway. You can't make that decision with the football in that type of situation when you're trying to come back. The second interception was awful. Linebacker read his eyes, and Purdy threw it right to him. To have 2 interceptions on back-to-back plays in that spot, that's just backbreaking, and it takes all of the wind out of your sails. Purdy was going to hit a rough patch at some point. It's really important to talk about this. Every young quarterback does it. Every veteran quarterback at some point hits a rough patch. Things were going too swimmingly and too easy for San Francisco as well as Purdy. 10-0 in the regular season, hadn't thrown an interception in the first 5 games, barely throwing any interceptions at all. That luck was going to run out, and right now it's running out. I will say it's good for this to happen right now. It's also been difficult for Brock Purdy to play from behind, and we're not sure if he's going to be a franchise quarterback because of his inability to play from behind. But he's going up against Joe Burrow. He's going up against Kirk Cousins, and when you dig yourself an early hole and you're turning the ball over and your defense can't get off the field, Fred Warner even said, it puts your quarterback, especially your young quarterback who's still inexperienced, in a really tough spot. I thought what Kurt Warner said about Purdy is pretty interesting. He said, quote, "Those people out there saying that Brock Purdy is struggling aren't watching the games. Young man is playing some really good football, making all kinds of plays, not without mistakes, but who does? Quit looking at stats. They should back the narrative, not create it." I also think a positive note, Brock Purdy making a couple of plays with his legs, and that athleticism can help unlock this Niners offense when it's struggling a little bit. More on the defense here. Speaking of easy throws, I think that Kyle Shanahan could do a better job of scheming things up for Brock Purdy, but going back to the Niners defense, they're making things too easy for Kirk Cousins, Joe Burrow, and their opponents right now. A whopping 37.5% of Burrow's throws on Sunday were considered open, which is 3 to 5 yards of separation between the target and the nearest defender. Think about that. There's 3 feet in a yard. I failed elementary algebra in college, but I can do the math here. 3 feet in a yard, if that's 3 yards, that's 9 feet of separation. 5 yards of separation is 15 feet. That means that some of these Niners defenders are not even close to the person that they are guarding. So 3 to 5 yards of separation between target and nearest defender at the time of the ball's arrival. That's the highest percentage of open throws for any quarterback against the Niners this year, and the second highest of Joe Burrow in his career. Can't happen. Now, I will end with this. The Niners can turn it around. And while right now, I think that they're playing like frauds, some of you disagree. Get over your fandom and get with the facts. And some of you have disagreements with me in saying that this team is soft right now, but look at what you've watched over the last 3 weeks. I'm going to keep it real here on the show at all times. The Niners have the guys in that locker room, in that clubhouse, to display mental fortitude, who have shown that they can have mental toughness, and they have core pieces in that locker room who have shown that this team can turn it around. A lot of the core players from 2021 and 2022 are still on this team, and pretty much it's a lot of the same coaching staff, right? 2021, Niners started 3-5. They made it to the NFC Championship game. In 2022, started 3-4. This year they started 5-0. Now they're 5-3. The 5-3 start, much better than 3-5 and 3-4. There is time to turn things around. But going into the deadline, I think San Francisco has to make a move. Seattle Seahawks brought in Frank Clark. Today they just traded for Leonard Williams. Now it's up to the Niners to answer the bell, improve this football team, address the weaknesses, and coming out of the bye, start off on a good note against the Jacksonville Jaguars and go on a tear the back half of the season. So we go back to our poll question here. The Niners are what? Contenders or pretenders? I think they're contenders for sure, but they got to get it together. Let me know. Don't forget to subscribe, and our coverage going into the deadline tomorrow will be awesome.